Alright, so this is a follow-up to my other video, and I had to make sort of a under 2 minutes one for the official requirements of the project, but I figure I'd want to do at least a little bit more of an extended view to at least give kind of a more comprehensive overview of what's actually going on here. So just to, I guess, sum it up in basically, this is a text-based RPG written entirely within Python, and I have kind of the main program written in the CS Quest Py thing dot right here. And first, I have all these kind of assisting functions that are referenced elsewhere over the course of the game, but these are called other commands, where basically I have these move, inspect, and talk commands are generally specific to the room that the player is in, whereas these are a little bit more universal. So I just kind of, depending on the user's prompt, I just sort of pass this into its own function right here. This is a move list, which during the course of move, it helps print out all of the locations for the player's current room, and it prints a list of the paths and an option for them to move. Game quit, pretty self-explanatory. This allows them to quit the game if they want at sort of any prompt. And then this is a controls function that basically prints out a list of all the controls that the player could want. You can get kind of a good view of them, but I have a separate series of commands for the field and for the actual like battles. I have a shop function, which is basically if there are any NPCs that offer a chance to buy something, this will sort of pass through the item that is selected within the shop, depending on the player's input, and check if they're actually able to buy it or not. This is a defeat function that handles if the player gets defeated in battle, and right now it just transfers them to the beginning of the game, but it does not reset any flags. So basically, the punishment for losing at this point is you just have to kind of work your way all the way back, sort of like getting sent back to the temple in Zelda 2 for the NES, if you've played that. But this is sort of the main battle engine I have right now, where depending on certain events in the game, it will pass in an enemy function. And this is to make sure is because all of these are technically done to modifications of an enemy class and make sure to just set their HP to max every time. If they have a chance, the enemy might have a chance to, with higher speed, get an ambush attack on the player, in which case I run a specific script for them that's different from their normal attack script that can give out or return basically player damage. And this is just to make sure it won't underflow necessarily, and the player will take this much damage, and this is just to actually modify it. And again, also checking to adjust their HP to make sure it wouldn't underflow. And yeah, so this is also kind of just a quick loss check. If their HP is less than or equal to zero, again, just as a check in case anything goes wrong, return loss, which affects this, which will affect this up here, depending on, again, I can show you the specific rooms where that happens, but after that surprise attack, this is sort of the main battle loop where I have these functions defined within both the enemy and the player to check that they're both alive. So this is sort of the main thing is while true, well, normally the command prompts on the field, if you enter it incorrectly, will just sort of send you back to the default status of standing there. I have a while true loop here just because with the way this works, if a player inputs the command incorrectly, it would go right to the enemy's turn. So I don't want to have the player essentially wasting a turn, but basically this will prompt the player for a command, which is seen with this action thing. We can see more of that once we actually start. And if it equals attack or defend, we'll break the loop because I have very specific things for what happens with there. But if it's any of these other options, if they use the item, and again, I can show this battle item function later, but essentially if they use the battle item function incorrectly, it will just sort of continue back to reprompt into the command. If they use an item correctly, it will break because that's, and because all the items have functions for handling their use. So basically, if you use an item correctly, it'll have its intended effect already. If you choose these other options like controls, health, status, equip, or quit, even if they operate correctly, they still won't technically break out of this while true loop, so they're essentially kind of free actions that you can do. But if you click attack or defend, the attack step will basically record your current strength and assign damage to an enemy based on this damage formula right here. And this is to make sure that if the enemy is defending, which is handled with a flag, they'll basically apply their defense again to the damage formula, so it will reduce the attack. and then set the flag to false just so they won't be like automatically defending upon the next turn. Again, checking to make sure the damage doesn't use incorrectly. And then this will actually print the damage that they take, and this is a win check where if the enemy's HP is less than 0, print they're defeated, and I have these certain enemy drop functions that will like drop certain items from the enemies and also to drop their gold. So, but if the player just attacks and the enemy takes damage but is not defeated, then it's the enemy's turn, where they now pass in their normal enemy script for dealing damage. And if the player's damage equals none, which is a specific thing where if it's like they're waiting a turn or if they don't actually do a damaging attack, it'll skip through the rest of this. But otherwise, if it brings back a specific player damage number, then it will kind of apply similar processes earlier, where it will subtract HP from the player, check if they're defending, obviously. And the damage formula is handled within the enemy script, but I just wanted to basically talk about what it does here, and it will print that exact amount of damage that the player takes and perform a similar loss check to the surprise attack, where if it's less than or equal to 0, again, just be careful, it will return loss. And this should actually, this actually has been working correctly, but this should be indented, but yeah, so those are the kind of helper functions, and then this is the main game right here, where some lovely ASCII art to kind of print off the title, and just kind of a little bit of a developer's note. And this is also another while true loop, because it's basically saying I want the player to be able to enter the controls correctly. And to show both, it will print off the whole list of controls, but also that they can get used to the process of actually typing out these command strings. So after showing the whole list of controls, I have a similar process for start, and once that does, it starts the game. So it displays this message about the player waking up, but to move a little bit faster, basically the way the game works is the locations flag, if I can just jump to that quickly, locations flag is initially set to this specific class within maps. So all the locations operate under this principle where there's a function and then a while loop, which will allow the player to keep getting prompted for an action. So this is the old cave 1 function, and while the location is this old cave 1 thing, I can prompt move. And just to show you, I guess, the most basic example of how flags work, if this flag is set to false, it's kind of hinting at the player to use the inspect command. And if they do use the inspect command, it will both print out the description for your current location, but it will also set that flag to true, which means the next time it will have the kind of normal function where it prints off all the places you can go. And if you do end up clicking that, it will print the transition to show you kind of walking there, and then a description of the room as you enter it, and then actually changing the location status, and then passing in Old Cave 2, and so on and so forth. So you're able to go back in rooms because it's, I guess, a somewhat recursive process where if you want to go back to Old Cave 1, it's not only about setting the location, but also calling the function specifically. So that continues for a lot. Another, I guess, specific thing to show is I use flags again to have a kind of fixed battle event where I declare the enemy type as this specific one from the enemy's database, which is the ceiling spider, and then using that, I pass that into the battle function, which means as of right now, the battles can only do 1v1, but that is sort of the basic approach I have. And this is sort of the check at the end where, like, if the battle function produces a win result, pretty much continue and make sure this is just a one-time event. If lose, then it triggers the specific defeat function. And so if the flag is not true, then it'll just, again, present kind of a basic move option like all the other ones. Similarly, I also have a one-time chest event where if you click inspect for the first time, instead of normally printing out the inspect description, it'll print out the specific one showcasing the chest. If they open it, it will append the player's inventory with these specific items. And that's basically how it continues for a while, and I am also, because I'm using these kind of function calls, I am able to have branching paths at several points. I guess just to show you another sort of quick feature, this is a random encounter where I have a random number generator, and if it's less than or equal to 1, so basically this is a 40% chance that the player will encounter a blue slime enemy, prints out a specific description, again passes enemy, standard battle stuff. So this basically happens after the player has selected where they're if they are selecting to go down path 3, after they select it, then this battle can trigger, and then they'll be transferred. So it's not like as soon as you click the move command, you'll have a bunch of... Every time you click the move command, you'll have the random battle, because that could get a little bit more annoying. And so I guess the only other last thing of note I want to show you that's unique is I have this specific series of... This is where the talk command is actually used to talk to this person, and this is also sort of meant to be like kind of an initial conversation flag where it'll take some time in between each of their responses, and also prompt the player just to make sure they can have a slightly different event depending on like what they say, and then some more dialogue from the person where they actually give you an item, and again just making sure to append that, and then basically it will go through this whole like initial conversation, and then go to their next sort of default thing, which is what they'll respond with after you ask them all the time. Where this is how the shop function operates, where there's a small list, and that list is passed in and then handled, and I have different conditions for depending on what's returned, and see his varying responses. So that's basically the main game. I also have this is just sort of helpful for creating rooms. And I know just want to go a little bit quicker because this video is also taking up space on my computer. The player function, I have a bunch of initial stats that are referenced here, which I use elsewhere. An initial inventory, and then an equipment thing, which I will specifically use for the functions of equipping things. So, again, this is for the battles. This is for printing all the items within that inventory list. This is a status thing, which will similarly print out like all the player stats so that the person can actually see, and their equipment. And this is the equip function. Now, this is a little bit unseemly just because, at least with the way I implemented it right now, I have to use kind of specifically named dictionaries, so I couldn't just kind of pass in a new string here and there. But regardless, the way basically all of these works is it'll print out all the items in the inventory for each of the... If you choose, depending on which type you choose, it will print out all the weapons you can equip. And then once entering that, it will again kind of look through your inventory and then equip that weapon. If you have no weapon, it will just sort of equip it automatically, modify your stats accordingly. If you have the same weapon equipped, you won't be able to equip it. And if you're equipping a new weapon, it will basically change all your old values back to the base state and then modify it by the new weapons values. And the same applies for armor and accessories. Again, this is a little bit unseemly, but it's just how it is at this point. I also have other functions defined within the player for basically using an item, where it'll select a list of items that can be used in the field, and this is ones that can be used in battle. So once you select which item you want to use, it will basically, again, kind of match it up. And this references every item function I create will have a use function within it, so using different items will have different results. Battle item is a pretty similar process, except again I have these kind of nothing returns to prevent the battles from, or to prevent the player from skipping their turn. And for all these classes, I create objects just to kind of reference them, because again, that was the easier thing. And because it's possible that like sometimes this will reference like the enemy's player, again, this might be a holdover, but I just included it just to be safe, because sometimes changing some of these would create a bunch of problems. But again, most of these, to I guess go over next, most of these next ones are also pretty similar. So these are all the items, and I have this kind of base case item class where all items will have these things, but then also has a subclass of weapon, and within that weapon subclass I also create a specific knife and a specific dagger where it has a monetary value, these stat modifications, and flags that they can be used in the battle or in the field. Can't at the moment. I have a similar thing for armor, a similar thing for the accessory, and then I have consumable items which, again, like I said earlier, have that specific use function. So this potion's a good example where if the player's HP is at maximum, it just won't operate, so you don't basically waste a potion if you have full health. But if you do, it will modify the player's health, again, prevent an overflow, display the specific name, and because this is a consumable item, I have it set to kind of remove the potion afterwards. Similarly, also this can be used in the field or in battle. Similarly, I have a fire charge. This is basically only used in battle, but it can be used to kind of do damage. And now this is basically where, I mentioned this earlier, but I kind of do all the damage internally within this use function. And then I have a key item, which I just distinguish from consumables, because these are, you can get more than one of them, but these are basically either items that will never be used up or might be required for progression. again, creating objects. The dictionaries is, again, a specific facet of the equip function. Because I reference the player and flags throughout these modules, because again, it's kind of this long chain sequence that you have to get right. So sometimes importing these at the bottom in a certain order helps. Maps, I have a sort of similar process where I have a base case and a whole bunch of initial things where these are all a bunch of like strings stored. The names are just for my convenience, but it will print the description upon sort of entering the room, the transition for actually going there, the inspection description, and then a list of paths. Sometimes I sort of hide the inspection description and sometimes I actually append to this list depending on what the player says. And this is also sort of a generic standing description for like this kind of the base action. And just for my own help, again, I also have all these sort of split into objects. And I also have a small little map guide and kind of a generic map case for ease of use. But it's just sort of for my own helpful reference and for anyone looking at the program. And this is enemies, second to last thing. So each enemy, again, has some kind of base stats when they're passed in. And again, these are specific enemy subclasses. And they reference all these sort of scripts that I referenced in battle will basically return player damage. And then the battle function will in turn convert that and like do damage to the player. But basically these are kind of AI scripts for the enemies and sort of describing what they do using different damage formulas, and I tried to mix it up. Like for example, it has a 50-50 chance with the spider here of just doing a regular attack or doing a slightly more damaging attack. And I also have a drop function for each of the enemies to basically like drop specific items with a certain chance. In this case it's 50-50. And here I also try a couple of other experimental things, like for example, I have these kind of incrementing ticks that go on. I reset this at the end of the battle just to be safe, but I have these sort of incrementing ticks for the enemies where their behavior will change depending on what step they are within their turns. The most interesting case, I guess, is this crow, where it will initially just kind of do a regular attack, but then it will increment the tick by 1. If it increments the tick by 1, then it sort of prints this thing that won't actually do damage, so I make sure to specify that. And this is supposed to kind of give a hint to the player that, okay, it looks like they're charging up, so you might want to defend here. And then it will, once that increments the tick again, they'll do a pretty damaging attack, and then reset the tick back to 0, so we're going to create this whole sequence. I didn't create it, but it would be possible to also do similar things for, like, if their HP is below a certain threshold. Then finally, the least interesting one, these are just flags. These are a whole bunch of flags I use for various points in the game. Not very interesting. They usually have like true, false, sometimes it's numbers, again like this entity tick one, sometimes it's location ones, but these are the flags are basically how this game works. So with that all explained, let me try to briefly give a quick demonstration of CS Quest. So we have a nice title screen here, and this is basically the sort of opening I have where it will prompt the player immediately to show all the controls. I've already explained most of these, but basically this is both so the player will know what they can do, but this is also to kind of get the player familiar with actually typing in these strings. So we click start. This is sort of the main game state. We're going to think, what are we going to choose our name? I'll just do Ryan for the sake of simplicity. So we're standing in the cave, and I already went over some of this, but I'll just show you how it kind of works in action. So if we click move, we're unsure of where we might need to go. So if we click inspect, it will bring out this additional description. So if we click move after that, we have a path we can choose. So I don't want to do that just yet because I want to show off at least a couple of the other features here. So if we click talk, for example, there is no one to talk to at the moment. I'm just going to scroll down to kind of show you how this all works within this one old cave room. And then, again, I also have these as kind of the universal. So if I click items, we can show our entire inventory, complete with the description and the weapon type and the value, worth, and gold. Status screen basically shows your health, stats, and if you have anything equipped, as well as your gold. Equip, we do have one thing, we have a knife, so I will equip the knife. If we show status again, voila, our strength is improved. And it's also to show you the only usable item we have is a potion, but because our HP is at max, it doesn't allow us to use it. We can print your controls again, and we could quit if we wanted to. I'm going to click no just so we continue. But so now move along. We move into this next room where again prints the sort of transition description, the main description, and then describing us standing there. So then after that, I'm going to inspect just to see if there's anything of note here. Not really. So we can move. This wasn't triggered by the inspect description. I probably could have showed that earlier. But now we're heading into this next room where I just want to inspect here just to see if there's anything unique. And voila, there is a chest. So if we click yes on the chest, we will open it and obtain some items. I mean, I'm not being too subtle about what might happen, but now that we got what looks like a better weapon, we can equip this dagger and see that, voila, our strength is improved. So now if we click move, I have the fixed event of the spider coming down. So they get a surprise attack on us. Because we equipped the dagger specifically, it'll do a little bit more damage. Looks like they still got an attack in. I'm not too worried about dying, so do another attack, take damage, the ceiling spider's defeated, and these are their drops. And the potion was a random drop, didn't happen to drop this time, but we can now move into the outside location. So we're now in the sort of grassy area. Let's see, here we can kind of move on to the main road. We're still on another dirt path. We want to sort of continue on to the main road, we can do that. So we're continuing to the end, but it looks like there's a boulder blocking our path. So as it is right now, it looks like we sort of traveled in a straight line. If we click inspect here, it looks like we're not sure of if we can really get around it. So, oh no, sorry, that was just a mistake of me typing that incorrectly. Inspect does not appear the way around. Yeah, that's what it should show. I just misspelled it earlier. So that should give us a hint, hopefully, to actually move back to the cave path. And this was one place we weren't really too scrupulous about. But we inspect it. Looks like there's a small trail. Just like the other example, this opens up a new path for us to explore. And here's a random battle triggered. So this is a specifically strong attack. I might want to heal up here just to be safe. Sorry, it's use, not items. I'm going to use a potion. We're going to heal. Or that's something I'll just have to fix quickly. So there's a little small grammar error right there. And I'm going to attack the slime. Takes 4 damage. Again, aside from that like one little typo I'm going to fix, this is pretty much like the final project as it's going to be submitted. Maybe with a couple of comments, but no modifications to how this works. So now we're standing in a new location. Doesn't look like we're able to get through, so we could try and move back. Just going to input some nonsense to do that. You should probably have learned by now, if we click inspect, we can make out some smoke over the bush tops. So we could move here. We have another path opened up. Another random battle. It's our lucky day. Still doing pretty decently. I don't need to heal up. Blue slime is defeated. So now we make our way into a clearing. A small hut lies. So we can inspect here, just to again kind of see the location in general. We can see some weather tools. And now that we see an old man resting, we can actually try the talk command. So this is again a first time dialogue event where we will hear the old man say a couple of things, and I have some wait things to basically display their dialogue. Saying, it's nice of you to drop by. Did you come from that cave? Sort of lie to him. This is a one-time thing. So if you click yes, you would get a slightly different response. So here the man is generous enough to give you a pickaxe. So that scrolled through a little bit quickly, but he tells us basically that, again, there's a boulder. He gives us a pickaxe to help break it. And he does offer us a shop. We can exit out of the shop if we want to. But if we, let's say I was trying to buy this garb, I'm pretty sure we don't have enough for this. Yeah, not enough gold. Let me just check my status real quick. You know, we don't have enough gold for anything that was offered in the shop. So now if we try to move out of here, we'll go back to the bush patch. There is a battle that was there, but it was a random battle, so we didn't end up triggering it, which is nice. So if we go back to the main road, and if we head back to where that boulder was, now this is where use, I have a specific thing for the pickaxe when it is used or returns a certain result. So if we use the pickaxe here, it breaks the boulder apart. So now we're able to proceed ahead. And I have another, this one isn't quite a random battle, the odds are pretty stacked against you, but so now this is a crow, a new type of enemy. I'm just going to defend at the moment, or I might as well heal. Sorry, to use. Gonna use this potion, heal up. Again, I'll fix that later. So the crow swipes. That doesn't look like the odds were in his favor that time. So if we attack, we can do a little bit of damage. The crow is ready to swing, so that's going to be a hint to the player that there is something coming. So if we defend, yeah, that reduced the damage very greatly. If it hadn't, that might have been pretty damaging to us. So now if we click attack, crow will take 4 damage. It's still not dead yet. We'll kind of again go through that sequence. Takes 4 damage, the crow is defeated. 2 gold. Yeah, so that's basically all there is to the game right now. I overviewed basically everything there is. But with this sort of setup, I can create kind of additional rooms for towns and stuff like that, create other events and flags to trigger different things, and have actual sort of caves and dungeons and chests to explore. So I was able to make kind of this full text-based RPG within Python. And I know not in the equip function, I think definitely could be better, but this is basically everything as it is right now. And I enjoyed kind of making this and sort of seeing what I could do with it. And it does require a lot of this kind of hopping back and forth between modules, but I think it turned out pretty well. I overpromised with my initial documentation, but considering the only coding experience I had before this was kind of messing around with RPG Maker, I'd say this has been a really fun time kind of exploring through this, and this is going to be, hopefully I'll do well on this. And I guess that's it for now. Thank you for sticking for this extended video, and that's all there is to it.